He was born property. He couldn't leave, couldn't own anything, couldn't even protect his own body. And yet his words have outlasted every emperor who ever owned him. This is the story of Epictetus, a slave who never wrote a single word, but whose ideas shaped emperors, generals, and 2,000 years of human thought. Around the year 50 AD, in the city of Hierapolis in modern-day Turkey, a boy was born into slavery. We don't even know his real name. Epictetus is not a name, it's a label. It means acquired. He was a thing that someone bought. His master was Epaphroditus, a wealthy freedman who served in Emperor Nero's household. The ancient sources tell us Epictetus walked with a permanent limp. One account says Epaphroditus deliberately broke his leg. Another says it was a childhood illness. Either way, he carried that broken body for the rest of his life. But here is where the story turns. Epaphroditus, for reasons we don't fully understand, allowed his young slave to attend lectures. Specifically the lectures of Musonius Rufus, the most respected Stoic teacher in Rome. Perhaps it was a status symbol. Perhaps he saw something in the boy. Whatever the reason, it changed the course of philosophy. Picture it, a crippled slave, sitting in the back of a Roman lecture hall, surrounded by the sons of senators and wealthy merchants. He owned nothing, he controlled nothing, and Musonius Rufus stood at the front and said, "The only thing that truly belongs to you is your mind. Everything else can be taken. For anyone else, that might have been abstract philosophy. For Epictetus, it was the most concrete truth in the world. He had no freedom, no possessions, no rights over his own body. But his thoughts, his judgments, his responses to what happened to him, those belonged to him. And no chain, no master, no empire could touch them. This became the foundation of everything he would teach." At some point after Nero's death in 68 AD, Epictetus gained his freedom. The details are lost. He began teaching philosophy in Rome, gathering students, building a reputation. For nearly 2 decades, he taught in the capital of the empire. Then in 93 AD, Emperor Domitian, paranoid, suspicious of intellectuals, banished all philosophers from Rome. Epictetus was expelled along with them. Most people would see this as a catastrophe. Exiled from the center of the civilized world, forced to start over in a small Greek town called Nicopolis. Epictetus saw it differently. He opened a school, and that school became one of the most important in the ancient world. Students traveled from across the empire to hear him speak. Not because he was eloquent or dramatic. By all accounts, his style was blunt, direct, sometimes harsh. He would challenge students, mock their excuses, push them to examine whether they actually lived by the principles they claimed to believe. He had a way of cutting through pretension. A student would complain about some hardship, and Epictetus would say, "Is this within your control or outside it? If it's outside your control, why are you wasting your energy? If it's within your control, why haven't you acted?" Simple, devastating, impossible to argue with. He never wrote any of this down, not a single word. Everything we have from Epictetus was recorded by one student, a young Roman named Arrian, who later became a historian and consul. Arrian sat in those lectures and wrote down what he heard as faithfully as he could. The result was 2 texts, the Discourses, 4 books of Epictetus's teachings, though originally there were 8, and half are lost, and the Enchiridion, a short handbook that distills his philosophy into its purest form. The Enchiridion opens with one of the most famous lines in philosophy: "Some things are within our power, while others are not." That's it. That's the entire foundation. Everything Epictetus taught flows from this single distinction. Your opinions, your desires, your reactions, those are yours. Your body, your possessions, your reputation. What other people do, those are not. Most people spend their entire lives trying to control what they cannot and neglecting what they can. Epictetus said this is the source of all misery, not what happens to you, but the confusion about what belongs to you and what doesn't. He taught this to the sons of senators. He taught it to future governors and generals. And one copy of his teachings found its way into the hands of a young man who would become the most powerful person on earth. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, read Epictetus and was transformed. His private journal, which we call Meditations, quotes and references Epictetus more than any other philosopher. The emperor of the known world built his inner life on the teachings of a former slave. Think about that. A man born as property, whose leg was broken, who was exiled from Rome, who never wrote a word. His ideas shaped the mind of the most powerful man alive, and not just Marcus Aurelius. Centuries later, Epictetus influenced the founding fathers of America, the development of cognitive behavioral therapy, the training of Navy SEALs, and the personal philosophy of countless people who have never even heard his name. James Stockdale, a fighter pilot shot down over Vietnam, spent 7 years as a prisoner of war. He was tortured repeatedly. He later said that the only thing that kept him sane was Epictetus. "I am a slave," Stockdale told himself, echoing words written 2,000 years earlier. "I own nothing, but my mind is free." This is what Epictetus understood better than anyone. Freedom is not a circumstance, it is a practice. It doesn't come from breaking your chains, it comes from realizing that the deepest part of you was never chained at all. He lived simply until the end. He owned almost nothing. Late in life, he adopted a child who would otherwise have been abandoned, raising it with a woman who may have been his partner. Even this act reflected his philosophy. You cannot control what the world throws away, but you can choose to pick it up. Epictetus died around 135 AD in Nicopolis, a crippled former slave who never sought fame, never wrote a book, and never held any position of power. And yet, nearly 2,000 years later, people still sit down and read his words when their world falls apart. Because the truth he discovered in that Roman lecture hall as a boy who owned nothing turns out to be the most durable truth in philosophy. You do not control what happens to you. You control how you respond. And in that response lives everything that matters. The slave understood freedom better than the emperors, and his words are still setting people free.
If these words stayed with you, subscribe and let us keep listening together.